I'll recognize myself now. And I think the first question, if you can put out the map of the White House up there. The first question, Director, if you look at the lower portion, the first question the American people want to know was, is there a crash button, and had it been pushed, would it have locked the front door, what's marked as the entrance hall?
The front door at the time did not have an automatic locking mechanism. It required an individual to hand lock the door. Okay.
So we have an automated system that can lock down the White House. $800 million a year, millions of dollars more during your tenure each year than the President's request, and that door was unlocked with no one standing at it when Mr. Gonzales came through it. Is that correct?
The door was unlocked at the time of Mr. Gonzales' entry. That's correct.
Okay. And earlier, there was a report, and in the indictment of Mr. Gonzales, that he was apprehended at the entrance hall. Isn't it true today that we understand that is not true? He was actually apprehended at the green room. Is that correct?
If I may clarify my first answer, the front door actually consists of two doors. There's an outer door, which is a glass, almost described as a storm door, and an inner door, which would be a wood, ornamental, historic door. The outer door, the glass storm door, was not locked. The internal wood door was in the process of being hand-locked.
Okay. Bottom line is, automated locking is a capability within the White House, but not at that entrance at that time.
Not at that time, but it has since been installed and is effective today.
We learn from our mistakes. The second question, your agency previously had reported, and an indictment against Mr. Gonzales asserted that he was arrested in that entry area. Isn't it true that he actually penetrated the cross hall, the east room, and in fact was arrested in the vicinity of the green room?
Referring to your map on the wall,
yes.
As I have been briefed, Mr. Gonzales entered the front double doors.
Ma'am, I want a short answer. I have very little time. Was he in fact, the Federal complaint said he was yes, in fact apprehended in one place. Isn't it true he was apprehended further into the White House?
As Mr. Gonzales entered the door, he knocked back the officer that was standing at the doorway. The officer then engaged Mr. Gonzales. They crossed the east entrance hall together, made the left turn down the cross hall. They stepped momentarily into the east room. Another officer rendered aid, and he was placed on the ground, on the carpet, and handcuffed on the cross hall just outside of the green room. There is no indication
so in fact, the Federal complaint and the earlier reports were not accurate. Is that correct? Yes or no, please.
I think the original complaint is accurate that Mr. Gonzales scaled the fence.
Ma'am, hold it. I have very little time, and I'm not. The American people want to know if there is the President safe. I want to know if we can rely on reports from your agency. Now, going back to Mr. Hernandez, during your watch, not as Director, but as Chief of Staff to the Director, is it true that, in fact, as reported, agents falsely assumed that they were not gunshots when they were gunshots, that, in fact, there were stand-down orders to people who had already pulled shotguns out, that, in fact, the bullets were not discovered to have hit the White House in real time within a 24-hour or greater period by the Secret Service? Yes or no, please.
Mr. Chairman, you're referring to the Ortega shooting that occurred in November 2011.
Yes.
At that time, it is my understanding that there was reports of shots being fired in proximity to Constitution Avenue.
No, stop, please. I want to be considerate to you. You have a hard job, but you head an agency whose morale has gone down. It is lower than other comparable Federal agencies. It has had a series of embarrassments. We're going to leave the embarrassments out. We've had 2 cases in which the reporting is evolving. Only last night did the public learn that, in fact, it was far worse or at least somewhat worse, on September 19th. Only recently has it been revealed, and you said you wanted to correct the record. The Washington Post makes it clear, from what I read, that in fact on November 11th of 2011, shots were fired, the assailant left, while in fact the Secret Service supervisor shut down the response of people who believed rightfully there had been shots fired, and in fact the follow-up did not discover the damage to the White House and the actual shots in real time. Additionally, Mr. Ortega-Hernandez is the way I have it written, would not have been apprehended except that he had a car accident. And even when he was, it was not immediately linked to his criminal activity. That in fact, the system at the White House did not detect the actual shots fired and begin the pursuit of somebody who had provided lethal force against the facility of the White House. Is that correct? You were Chief of Staff at the time. Is that roughly correct? And if it isn't, I'd allow you whatever time you need to properly explain what really happened on November 11, 2011, so the American people can understand that September 19th is not the first time there has been considerable lapse, as I see it, and in fact during a long period of time, during your Chief of Staff time, now during your Director time, we have had the kinds of things that we should be concerned about for protecting the President. So please tell us, in whatever time you need, about November 11, 2011, where the Washington Post is right or wrong. This is your chance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you're aware, my assignment as Chief of Staff—
Could you get the microphone a little closer, please?
Certainly. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. As you're aware, in 2008, my assignment with the United States Secret Service was Chief of Staff. My primary responsibilities at that time were business transformation and IT transformation for the organization. My focus was on the business operations of the organization. To my knowledge, and based on the briefings that I have received of this 3-year-old investigation that occurred in November of 2011 that appeared in the Washington Post on Sunday, I had also been aware that Representative Chaffetz had asked for a data inquiry, and we responded back to the committee on September 12th and provided him detailed information of the Secret Service's activities on that weekend. Shots were reported by the United States Secret Service officers in the area of Constitution Avenue and 15th. There were witness accounts of a black vehicle that had fired shots. There was confusion at the time by the part of the witnesses as to what they had witnessed and what they had saw. Several of those witnesses put out Twitter accounts of what they had witnessed. They were subsequently located and interviewed and recanted those statements. The actual shots that were fired in proximity to Constitution Avenue and 16th, the vehicle sped away and went westbound on Constitution, erratically driving, and struck a light post in the area of 23rd and Constitution. Mr. Ortega then fled the vehicle. Park police officers and uniform division officers ultimately responded to the scene where the vehicle was left with the AK-47 in the front seat. Park police has jurisdiction over the traffic accident and assumed responsibility for the initial phases of the investigation.
Ma'am, I'm going to give you all the time you need, and I thank the ranking member. But the answer is, where are the inconsistencies with what we now know from the Washington Post? You said that they got the story wrong, they were misstating it, they were mischaracterizing it. I'd like to hear the inconsistencies. So far, you're just corroborating that, in fact, the understanding of the series of failures in real time to protect the White House are in fact correct, according to the Washington Post. So please tell us where they're not correct, please.
Throughout the course of this, there was a command post established down at Constitution Avenue and 23rd Street. Metropolitan Police Department, the U.S. Park Police, the United States Secret Service were there attempting to resolve or understand from the witness accounts what had happened along Constitution Avenue. Back at the White House, individuals had heard what they believed to be shots. The Secret Service, according to the records that I have been able to locate on this 3-year-old investigation, did respond properly. The emergency response teams and other officers did a protective sweep of the area to make sure that we did not have any intruders, to make sure that there were not injuries and obvious signs of anything that had been damaged. Further investigation with the Park Police, they were unable to resolve at that time as to whether or not these were shots being fired at other vehicles or shots being fired at the White House. That took some time to understand. It wasn't until the Usher's office was preparing for the return of the President and First Family, or the President and the First Lady, that they identified damage on the Truman balcony. That led to further investigation, and that led to us contacting the Federal Bureau of Investigation to initiate their full investigation.
Thank you. Mr. Cummings, I want to thank you for your understanding and just relate something that you and I discussed yesterday, if I may. In Washington, D.C. and around the country, there are a number of systems that we all know, and Baltimore, I believe, has it too, that they're basically microphones that hear gunshots, can identify the direction, can quickly, without human intervention, figure out whether or not a real shot has been fired, confirm it, and often give a very accurate direction. That type of technology isn't so odd that we don't see it in our cities. And I think that's the reason I went on so long with this question. Ms. Norton, I know, knows this. The district does have a sophisticated system, and I think the committee is going to want to make sure that not only does the White House have a higher level of awareness of this system, but that the district system be enhanced if necessary to make sure that something like this never happens again. And I thank the gentleman for his patience.